For the past 3 months, Frank had been working in the IT department of one of the stuffy offices of which there were thousands across the country. He liked his work for the most part. If only it wasn't so boring, things would be great. The salary was relatively small, but being a recent college graduate, the young man was happy about it nonetheless. The company was run by an elderly and experienced businessman who did a lot of charity work and was an honorary resident of the city. One day, the director asked for a couple of volunteers to get off work early to go to the orphanage and bring over a batch of donated items and some groceries. Having heard about it, Frank realized that his time had come. He saw this assignment as an opportunity to take a break from the stuffy office, which he was very tired of. "Mr. Kane, I'd love to go. I'll take Ben Parker with me. We'll get the job done," the young man suggested. The businessman smiled knowingly and immediately gave the volunteers his approval. Frank knew that Ben would never miss an opportunity to get out of the office. He'd probably agree to go to the ends of the world just to get a break from his mundane job. Since all the donated items were already loaded into the van, all the men had to do was get gas inside and patiently wait for the driver. Fortunately, he came in about a minute and immediately started the engine. Frank had never been to that orphanage, so he didn't really know where it was located. It took about half an hour to drive there. The dirt road leading to the orphanage was in a terrible state, which couldn't but upset the man, who jumped on the bumps every couple of seconds. Finally, they saw the orphanage appear in the distance. It turned out to be a massive building that was built in the middle of the last century. The way it looked couldn't but evoke all kinds of sad feelings. Gray, nondescript walls and windows with peeling paint completely ruined the mood of the young man, who simply wanted to unwind and get out of working in the office. They were greeted at the gate by the orphanage director, who told the driver where he could park the van. "Well, now it's our turn to work," Frank exclaimed and rubbed his hands. Frankly speaking, he was already tired of sitting in the van, and therefore he was eager to get down to business as soon as possible. Soon, the young men were unloading the cardboard boxes full of clothes and groceries. About half of the kids ran out of the orphanage to look at them. "Did you bring any toys?" a boy of about 5 asked timidly. Frank shuddered and looked at the kiddo in surprise. The man felt very uncomfortable because the little kiddo asked him a question he couldn't really answer. "I'm sorry, kiddo, I don't think there are any toys here," Frank replied sadly. The boy sighed in disappointment and answered, "It's okay, it's just that we don't have many toys here. I like cars and soldiers, but we only have building blocks and dolls." The boy's answer made Frank's heart sink. The last thing he expected to hear was that the kiddos didn't have enough toys to play with. "It's okay, kiddo. We'll come back and we'll bring you toys. I might even bring you a construction set. Would you like that?" "Do you have to ask?" "Of course I'd like that. And not just me. My name's Kevin Moore, by the way, but my friends call me Kev. Ask for me when you come back," the boy exclaimed joyfully. Frank gave him a thumbs up and promised that he'd come back as soon as he'd get the chance. Ben looked at his colleague in surprise and shook his head. The man couldn't help but feel upset by the trip. He was feeling so sorry for the kids that he even teared up. Frank was about to get into the van when he suddenly saw a tall, plump woman. The director and the caretakers were running around her as if she was the most important person on Earth. "She's probably some important donor. It's just too obvious," the man whispered. At that moment, a person standing nearby said, "Her father is George Wilson. He's a millionaire. Her name is Diana. She does charity work, and this orphanage is under her care." Frank chuckled, then looked at Diana, who was patiently listening to the director's report at the time. "Some donor she is. She doesn't even know that the kiddos don't have toys. She probably only comes here for the publicity," the man added. Ben squinted at his colleague in dismay, but didn't argue with him. Diana was a little overweight, but that didn't make her any less beautiful. It was hard to tell if someone told Diana what Frank had said, but it was obvious that she noticed the young man. As they were leaving the orphanage, Frank looked back and waved at Kevin. He liked the boy for his childish sincerity and open nature. Frank knew that he would never be the same again after his visit to the orphanage. The fate of the little orphans he didn't even know never worried him as much as it did now. The trip to the orphanage left some conflicting impressions on the young man. On the one hand, he saw that the kiddos were well taken care of, And on the other hand, the man couldn't understand how it was even possible for the kids not to have enough toys to play with. Can't this millionaire woman Diana buy the kiddos a couple of playsets? It's not like it would bankrupt her, Frank thought. The rest of the week flew by. Frank was busy with work and was very happy when the week was finally over. As soon as he got his paycheck, the young man rushed to the toy store and fulfilled the promise he made to Kevin. Once in this realm of toys, Frank moved from shelf to shelf and researched for something special and beautiful. Remembering Kevin's love for cars, the man bought him a miniature toy crane whose parts and components were made to match the real thing. He didn't forget about the rest of the kiddos either and bought an entire bag of toys for them. Well, that's better. This will definitely make Kevin happy, Frank thought with a smile. The man put the toys in a bag, called a cab, and told the driver his destination. Imagine the surprise of the orphanage staff when a stranger arrived at their door with a bag full of gifts like Santa. Seeing the joy in Kevin's eyes, Frank couldn't hold back his tears. The boy's eyes literally shone with happiness and were filled with the kind of joy only little kiddos can feel. Wow, what do we have here? A new donor? Frank heard a voice behind him. The man turned around and saw Diana. She was smiling as she watched him give out toys, trying to make sure that every kiddo got something. Well, I got my paycheck and wanted to get something for the kiddos, Frank answered. Diana respectfully looked at the man, whom she suddenly saw in a completely different light. The last time she saw Frank, Diana understood that he was simply doing what his boss asked of him, but now he came to the orphanage out of his free will. Frank and Diana didn't even notice as they started talking. As it turned out, the millionaire's daughter really didn't know that the kiddos didn't have any toys. Moreover, the director of the orphanage always gave her detailed reports about what Diana's donations were used on, claiming that she bought the kiddos everything they wanted. He must have lied to me and stolen the money, and how am I supposed to trust people after that? Diana drawled disappointedly. After talking to this intelligent young woman, Frank suddenly felt a surge of inexplicable sympathy for her. Now, Diana didn't seem arrogant anymore, and she definitely wasn't selfish. As for the woman's appearance, Frank didn't seem to notice any flaws in this pretty, charming woman. After talking to Frank, Diana had an extremely unpleasant conversation with the director of the orphanage, during which he pointed out his mistakes and how he failed to provide the kiddos with everything they needed. Miss Wilson, ma'am, I promise you to fix everything. Just give me one more chance, please. The man tried to reassure Diana. The director knew that if Diana shared her concerns with her father, he would face serious problems. Diana was used to trusting people, and therefore she forgave the director, who made an extremely unfortunate mistake in life. But that wasn't even what worried the woman the most. After her conversation with Frank, she found herself drawn to him as if with a magnet. There was something about the man that made Diana's heart beat faster at the mere thought of his name. The most interesting thing was that Frank felt the same way about her. It just so happened that it was after that memorable meeting within the walls of the orphanage that Diana and Frank started seeing each other almost every day. They both always came up with very important and plausible reasons to set up a date. Having learned that Frank was dating the millionaire's daughter, his friend Ben felt very jealous. Do you really like that fatty? Just look at her, she's plain ugly. You're probably after her money, the man once said during lunch. Frank's cheeks instantly flushed with color, and his lips turned into one continuous line from anger. How dare you? What does her money have to do with our relationship? I'm not interested in her fortune. You're being ridiculous. Since the conversation between Frank and Ben was rather public, rumors immediately spread around the office. For the most part, the other employees didn't really believe that an attractive man could date a plain-looking woman like Diana. Fortunately, the couple didn't care about the opinions of others and only focused on their own happiness. It's hard to say whether they would have gotten married at that point. But after Diana's father found out about her relationship with the IT guy, things took a very unexpected turn. What do you think you're doing? Do you want me to become a laughingstock for my partners? Do you want everyone in town to talk about how George Wilson's daughter is ready to marry the first guy she met? The businessman was indignant, waving his hands in the air like a madman. This was the first time Diana had seen her father so angry, and frankly, she was shocked by his take on the situation. The woman didn't see anything wrong with starting a family with the person she loved. Having told Frank about this incident, Diana was pleasantly surprised to see the young man's determination and willingness to fight for her. "It's okay. Your father is against our relationship. We won't invite him to our wedding. I don't care about your money or his money," Frank answered. Diana smiled and hugged her fiancé. The woman was very relieved to hear his answer and didn't doubt the man's sincerity for 1 minute. After all, not everyone could find the strength to go after an influential millionaire who made his subordinates and business partners tremble with fear with his appearance alone. In addition to dating Diana, Frank also came to see Kevin every weekend. He grew very attached to the little boy. Looking at Kevin's joyful eyes, Frank caught himself thinking that he wanted to have a child. During one of Frank's visits, Kevin took him by the hand and asked quietly, "Do you think you could adopt me? We could see each other every day. Can you even imagine that? We could play baseball and roller skate every day." The boy's words made Frank's heart skip a beat. The thing was that Kevin seemed to have read his mind. Frankly speaking, Frank was thinking about it for quite some time, but he was afraid to tell Diana about it. But when the young man raised this topic in the conversation with his fiancée, all he got in response was her complete support and approval. "Of course, I wouldn't mind that. How could you even think so? I really like Kevin. He's a sweet and kind boy," Diana exclaimed. Now that the most pressing issue was resolved, the young people started thinking about getting married. Since they couldn't count on any kind of support from Diana's father, Frank suggested that they could marry in secret, without any official press coverage or publicity. It took the young couple about a month to get ready for such an exciting event. On the day of their wedding, there were unusually few people in the city hall. The groom only had his mother as a guest, and the bride invited a couple of her friends and a colleague from the volunteer center. In addition to the adults' guests, there was also a little boy in a suit who was running around the wedding couple, calling them mom and dad. At the same time, the bride didn't really look like she was the daughter of a well-known millionaire. After exchanging rings, the newlyweds sealed the union with a passionate kiss, after which they went out into the street. Of course, this wasn't the kind of wedding Diana dreamed of. Deep down, she wanted a big wedding with live music and hundreds of waiters in elegant uniforms, fulfilling any requests of her guests. But when the couple began to descend the stairs, loud applause broke out, which was immediately replaced by the divine sound of several saxophones, violins, and drum kits. Diana looked to the left in surprise and saw her father in a tuxedo and a bow tie standing in front of her, looking very important and proud. "Did you think old George wouldn't come to see his own daughter's wedding? You better think again. I knew all about your plan to get married in secret, so I decided to surprise you," Mr. Wilson explained, seeing the shocked look on Frank's face. "Well, you sure did surprise us, Dad," Diana said with a smile. But the happiest among them all was little Kevin, whom the young parents finally got custody of a couple of days before the wedding. Now, the boy's life would have everything he'd been dreaming of over the past few years. Having approached his son-in-law, George Wilson shook his hand, hugged him, and said quietly, "I hope you don't plan on stopping at just one kiddo. Mind you, I want to have at least a dozen grandkiddos who would all greet me with joyful screams every time I come to your house on Christmas with a bag of gifts." Frank smiled and looked at Diana, whose eyes were full of love and tenderness. Holding hands, all three members of the new family headed for the limousine that George Wilson hired for them. Now, the new family was headed for a honeymoon in Miami, and we can only wish for them a happy life together, full of love and mutual respect.